Welcome to the Miles to Zen podcast. Grab your favorite beverage and join me for a coffee date style chat with Gabriel, a conversation that covers all my favorite topics of being curious in your life, creativity, and connection. We discuss Gabriel's journey and quite literal journey from world travel to finding his way, and really get into a good behind the scenes conversation about design, which impacts all of our lives, but we don't really think about it. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Gabriel, to the Miles to Zen podcast. I'm really excited to see you here today and joining us.
Well, thank you so much. Great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, anytime. Gabriel, I thought maybe you could introduce yourself and then I'll give a little backstory of how we met and we can go from there.
Yeah, certainly. My name's Gabriel Goldsmith. I am owner and creative director at Eggbeater Studio, a small design agency in Vancouver.
So Gabriel and I met for the first time back in 2021. And I was working for a company at the time, and we called Gabriel and Eggbeater and their partners Puzzlewood in to help us with our branding. And so that's how I met Gabriel. But what I wanted to do before we get into talking about that, you can hear that Gabriel doesn't have a Canadian accent like mine, that he comes from the UK. And I think it's really an interesting story to hear how people got to where they are and how Gabriel ended up in Vancouver, but also for people who are navigating careers and career changes. I love hearing the backstory of how people got into certain careers. And Gabriel was telling me earlier that he'd done a lot of traveling for quite a while, left the UK, left the original schooling choice. And maybe you can tell us about this journey of yours.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm very disappointed that I haven't taken on a Canadian accent. I think it shows that I have not assimilated properly, even though I've been here for 15 years.
Well, if it makes
sound incredibly British.
If it makes you feel better, my dad is also from the UK, and we would cross the border and people would comment to him how much they loved his Canadian accent. And my brother, mom, and I were like, wait a second, we've got the Canadian accent, not him.
Did it change? Did you hear it change sort of when he was around people? Did he become more British?
Well, it became more British when he retired. All of a sudden, he didn't have to speak Canadian anymore, and it became more British. It was pretty funny.
Wendy, my wife, says every time I speak to my friends, I go a few rungs back down the social ladder. I become a bit more earthy, a bit more gritty.
Got a guy you want to bring into a bar fight or just walk down the street with at night?
That's right. So you were asking about.
So yeah, back to your journey. I'm famous for my segues.
So I'd gone to school, gone to university in my 20s, but it hadn't worked out. I didn't want to stick around, so I dropped out of university when I was 22. And then for want of a better thing to do, knowing that I had to sort of look around to try and find something else that I was interested in to try and put myself into, I sort of started traveling around Europe and working in different countries, doing unskilled jobs, working in a lot of restaurants and warehouses and building sites and things like that. And from there, I had traveled around Southeast Asia and Australia. So I'd been doing all that for 4 or 5 years, maybe. And then
a long time on the road to be traveling.
It was a long time. I mean, and when I was in Europe, I was going back intermittently to the UK just to visit, but I never lived back in the UK. I still wasn't very satisfied about what I was doing. So, I mean, I was definitely enjoying aspects of traveling and finding traveling fulfilling, but I certainly I hadn't found anything that I wanted to apply myself to.
I find that's often your 20s though, right?
That
Like
is
your
your
20s
20s.
is a lot of giving yourself permission to explore and see what lands.
Yes, giving yourself permission to explore and for me, finding something you want, finding something you want to, because unless you want it, you can't apply yourself to it. I mean, and the reason I had to leave university in the first place is because I was yet to learn the lesson that the very basic lesson of the benefit of hard work. My idea was that eventually I'd find something that I was incredibly talented in. And then I wouldn't have to do any work because I'd be fantastically talented and it would be great and people would pay me money to do it. And I have to say that certainly for me, and I'm guessing for everybody else in the world, that does not happen. That's not the way. What happens is you have to find something you really want and then work incredibly hard at it until you become good at it. That's how that works. So I was really yet to learn that lesson. I'd yet found something that I was really working hard at. And so I'd ended up in East Asia in Taiwan, where I lived for 4 years. And I'd always said from dropping out of college, I'd said if I don't find something that I want to do by the time I'm 30, I'm going to need to go back to school. And so I was getting up there. I was 28, 29. I was like, okay,
Really getting
not
pushed over the
happening.
hill, Gabriel.
I was over the hill. Well, I wasn't over the hill, but I could see the hill on the horizon, let's just say. And yeah, so I was in that position and I hadn't found something that I found very exciting and engaging. I was working as an English teacher, teaching English as a foreign language in Taiwan, which was great, but I knew I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. I wasn't a natural teacher. I wasn't a very good teacher. And so I had to make a kind of decision, a semi-random decision. Right, I'm going to do something. What am I going to do? And I decided on graphic design for a variety of reasons, I think.
Yeah, well, action is the best way to a decision, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
even no matter if even you're moving in the wrong direction, just that momentum of action, you can quickly, or sometimes quickly move the ship, steer the ship. But when
Yeah,
you have to go from a place of no momentum whatsoever, it's hard.
absolutely. It's way easier to pivot than it is to start from nothing.
Mhm.
And it really doesn't matter what you do. And I think I'd realized it by that point. It was that if I found something and really put myself into it, that I was gonna benefit from that one way or another. Maybe I didn't become a graphic designer, maybe I did something else, but I wasn't gonna find out unless I chose something and applied myself.
So what was it about graphic design that, got you heading in that direction?
Well, I think I'd always been interested in communication, visual communication. I think I knew that I had a good understanding of visual communication and how it worked, and that you're not just looking at graphics and design as pretty attractive things. You're looking at the message that they're trying to convey, and not just that message, but how that message will be received by its audience. So I think I understood that. I knew I had a grasp of that already, because I was
So,
quite a visual person.
so what was the first try at university? What were you studying?
English and philosophy.
Okay. Okay. Well, that sounds kind of fun, anyways. So that could have helped inform a few things as well. But then you felt
Yeah,
that you had a bit of a natural talent.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I thought that there was a possibility that I had sort of some kind of talent, maybe for graphics, but it was more the sort of understanding the intellectual structure behind it. I
Right.
knew that I got that, and I was able to see mm, fashions, not so much clothing fashions, but visual fashions. And I was interested in the visual application of other movements. Like, so I knew about the arts and crafts movement in the, in the Europe in the turn of the century. I knew about Art Nouveau and Art Deco and how that was an idea that was expressed through visual that had a visual application. So these were kind of rudimentary things. I didn't really understand how that was going to apply to commercial art and graphic design, but I knew I had a grasp on it. And also sort of less high concept. I was really bored of people asking me what I did and me saying, "Oh, I work in a kitchen. I work in a restaurant. I work in a factory." There's nothing wrong with any of those jobs. There's nothing wrong with working in any of those places. But that wasn't where I felt I wanted to be. I wanted to be in a different place. And there was a certain part of it, I know, it was like, okay, if somebody asks you, what do you do? And what's your reply? What is the reply that makes you feel happy? What is that reply that makes you feel like you? What's that reply that makes you feel like you're adhering to your own identity of who you want to be and who you are? And graphic design was a good fit.
Oh, that's such a powerful statement. And when you think about that, and when you're thinking about career choices and job changes, and when you say the name of your current job or the job you're looking for in the future, how does that feel? How does that resonate?
Yes. Does it feel like you? Well, I'm glad you say that because I always wondered if it was a bit superficial. I always wondered if it's like, how can you, you know, you can't just pick a career because you think it's like a cool sounding thing to be.
Well, I tell you, I live with a teenage boy, and that's all teenage boys do is pick careers based on the fact that they're cool sounding. And, sometimes that's not too far off, right? Like, I want to be a car designer for Ferrari.
Hmm.
All the power to them. You go
Yeah,
try that. That's great. At least you can get dreaming, and that sounds awesome.
it is awesome because a lot of people, I mean, it might be a crazy dream, but it's back to that thing of, okay, if you work hard enough at trying to get that, you might not get that, but you'll get something. You'll get skills, you'll get self-awareness. And also, I think for a long time, I thought when I was younger, oh, well, I can't do that. That's just everybody wants that. That's everybody's dream job. That's going to be so competitive. But I think
Yeah.
you have to realize that not everybody wants to be a car designer for Ferrari. For a lot
Yeah.
of people, they think, oh, I don't want to do that. I'd be no good at that. That's not something I'm interested in. I don't want to work with those sorts of people. I don't want to have to do those kinds of things. But if that to you is your dream job, that tells you a lot about who you are and the things that you think you're capable of and the things that you think you could be good at.
Exactly. And it's nobody's job to tell you that you can't or you won't be able to. And
No.
that's your life journey, right? Is
Yeah.
figuring what resonates along the way and what you can get excited about, and
Mhm.
if that's where you want to go, then fantastic. Get on that train.
Get on that train. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's only that thing that enthuses you. Because you're not
Yeah,
going to get anything out of anything that you don't work hard at.
there's
The reward of hard work. And you're only going to do that hard work when you're interested in it.
one of my favorite books, probably my favorite book of all time, is The Alchemist by
Mhm.
Paulo Coelho. And he talks about, in that book, is that the universe conspires to help anybody who's following their dream. But just before they're going to reach their dream, it's going to get really hard. And you're going to want to give up and then your dream is usually on the other side of that point of when you want to give up. And anyways, if anyone
Yeah,
hasn't read that book for a while, I like to read it
I've
every few
I've never
years.
read it. I'd like to read it very much. And I would also say that you for me, you can't discount the importance of finding something that aligns with you personally. And this is, to do with all of your actions, not just your career. But the big trick, back to what you're trying to do in your 20s, it's impossible to find something that aligns with you personally when you don't really know who you are.
Yeah.
You no idea, right? How do I find something? How do I know you don't know what your values are. You don't know, what to some extent, you don't know what you like and what you don't like. So you've got to get out there and try and find that out before you can, make these big decisions,
Well,
or,
and I
or
think,
find what it is you're looking for.
yeah, and your job and your career doesn't mean that that's what you are forever and that's it and
No.
that's who you are. It's just an aspect of the pie that is you. And I was at a conference back in the fall, and what I remarked compared to going to a normal conference that I'd been to in the clean tech world, energy sector world, was everybody wants to know what you do and what's your job. And that's because in that world, that's who you are to them. And I was at this, it was basically a girl power conference. It was fantastic. Nobody asked me what I did. It was just how you showed up. And it was quite refreshing, actually. Um, that this pie that makes up you, it's a big part because it really plays a huge role in how you feel going through the world and what you're chasing after. And it helps to put railings on your bowling alley, so to speak, in certain
Yeah.
in certain cases. But it's just because you decide to be one thing doesn't mean you have to be only that thing. That's the only thing that defines you. But like you said, that's why finding out who you are and what you like and what gets you excited, what makes your heart sing is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny actually, you saying that is reminding me, I was really taken when I first moved to Canada. I did notice that people asked you what you did a lot less here, and I found it so refreshing. It was so endearing. That, well, endearing is the wrong word, but I was used to that very much being how people define you in Europe, certainly in the UK. It's as you say, one of the first things people ask. For me, not just in um, a business setting such as a conference, but just generally socially. And when I first moved here, I was really struck by how little that happened. People so rarely asked me what I did because they were talking about other things. They were talking about, what do you enjoy? What have you been doing? What do you like doing? Which is absolutely a better way to go about getting to know somebody.
Well, and that segues us into why when I needed design services at that firm that I was working for, I hired your company because I actually made a conscious decision to hire based on joy and relief. Who are these people that I'm going to be working with? Like, who are they? Am I able to work with them? Will we be able to have a free exchange of ideas? Is there a likeness in how we approach our sharing of ideas and openness to just show up as our true selves?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that that worked out, and that was a good fit, and that you thought that we were able to provide you with all those things, because it is interesting as a designer, as in a design agency, as an agency owner. There are a lot of competent design agencies out there, a lot of competent graphic designers who are ostensibly equally able to produce a design of a high quality and something satisfying. So what, in the eyes of a client, is going to make you uh, stand out as a good prospect for them to work with. And what we have as a small agency, it's absolutely that, is our, our connection to our clients, and the fact that we talk openly and honestly to our clients, and we value collaboration, and there's not layers and layers of different workers and different professionals before you're speaking directly between stakeholder and designer. That's what we want. We want us as designers to speak directly to you as the stakeholder and the gatekeeper of the brand.
Well, and for me, especially, once you have seen that, okay, somebody can do the work, right? That there's the basics there. Then you can see, then it becomes like a human connection. And are they in align with your vision? And I think that when we do some heart-based decision making, that we're going to be happier in the outcomes. Maybe coming full circle, when we get back to the graphic design piece, can you explain to people that aren't familiar with graphic design and design in general, what it is and why a solopreneur or a company would want to actually get a graphic design professional to help them?
Sure, absolutely. So I would say that you think about why you'd hire a designer. What's the purpose of graphic design and the purpose of design in general? So the purpose of all design is to improve things. All the different design disciplines, product design, you're designing to improve an existing product for the most part. Interior design, you're trying to improve that interior. Graphic design, what you're working with is communication, visual communication. So the purpose of graphic design is to improve a piece of visual communication, because you don't need a graphic designer to make a piece of visual communication. You can understand your message. As long as you understand your message, you can write your message in 52-point black Helvetica type on a piece of paper, and you can show it to your audience. And that is a clear message, but nobody will care about it. There is no engagement. You have not resonated with your audience. You haven't even considered your audience. You haven't thought about not just your message, but the ideas behind the message. What are the emotions? Who are you? What is your personality as a business? And is that being reflected in the way you deliver your message? All of those ideas can be conveyed if you know what you're doing as a graphic designer. Does that make sense about the purpose?
Oh, absolutely. And that's an exercise, in fact, that you walked us through at the beginning when we were working with you, was really getting down to what's the identity of your company. And that exercise helped so much because it brought the whole company together to make sure that they were on board. And in super large companies, obviously it'd be a subset of people, then depending on your size, but nice to be able to have some tools to really know who you are. It's a process of like in your 20s.
Absolutely. How funny. Yeah, well, we love doing that. I mean, often that's a hugely rewarding and necessary part of the job, is the brand planning, because the message is delivered much more successfully if the audience understands where the message is coming from. If they understand, if they have a shared value with the person that's delivering the message. And like you say, often a lot of businesses have never thought about that. Well, who am I as a business? What are my values? How do I speak to people? Because with the whole idea of branding, we as human beings, we assign personalities to so many things. We assign personalities to animals, to our environment. We think of things as having a personality. And that is so doubly true for the companies that we engage with, that we engage with for services and products. So whether you like it or not, as a company, people are going to assume and give you a personality. Now, you need to understand what that personality is. You need to understand what your personality is and express that to people through your brand. And that does not mean you need to pick a set of values that you think are most attractive to your customer and then pretend that you have them through your branding. These have to be your authentic values. And working out what your authentic values are takes time. You need to sit down with everybody involved with the company and decide what they are as a group. Or not decide what they are, but understand what they are, because they exist, whether you like it or not.
So who would be, in your mind, a company, a well-known company that's done this right? Just off the top of your head.
Off the top of my head, I tell you who does it very well, famously, is Lego.
Oh.
Lego have a fantastic brand, and they have a fantastic brand proposition that guides not just their product, but guides who they are and their decision making. And I think it's not a direct quote, but it's based around, can you learn something and is it fun? Now you think about what Lego produces. Can you learn something? Is it fun? And that's, right at the heart of what Lego is. And that's right at the heart of why we love Lego, and certainly why a lot of parents buy Lego for their kids, because they can see it's fun and they can see their kids are learning something. So that is how Lego deals with himself as a brand. That's how they express themselves. You see their ads, you see their logos. There's elements of fun. It's soft, it's approachable and accessible, but there's always some kind of learning. They're always talking about learning. And they've even said that's how they make company decisions. Are we going to learn from this? And is it going to be fun? And if the answer is yes to both those questions, they do it. So that's
amazing. Yeah.
It's amazing. And that's how you make a brand proposition work through your entire company, not just how you speak to people, not just how you communicate, but how you act. And that makes it authentic and legitimate.
I read a book a few years ago called The Buddha and the Badass. And it talked about exactly that, about your values, but also having your personal values. And so you show up, what are your personal values? And is a brand going to reflect that for me? Is a job going to reflect that for me? Can we align on that? And in fact, before I started working with my last company, the CEO and I went for a walk in the woods, and which is very easy to do here in Vancouver, and talked for an hour about where his values came from and are we going to align. And that was super important for me, and making sure that those values flowed through the company.
Fantastic.
And so this stuff just builds. And I think, like you're saying, when you can have a strong value proposition and it's reflected in everything that you do, and you can have your brand embody that, then you've got a really great chance of success. And not only that, the story that you put out there is so much better. Think about the brand of Revlon when I was at business school. And I remember the marketing teacher saying that Revlon does not sell makeup, they sell hope.
Yes.
And that just stuck with me, because they are selling a feeling, right? Like Lego is selling a feeling.
Well, people connect with that so much more, than a product. Marketing, certainly advertising 101 is, you don't sell the product, you sell the benefit.
Right.
What's the benefit of this product? What's the benefit of this service? That's what people care about. How is this going to improve my life? The thing.
So let's talk about when you've produced something, um, say when you've produced a logo, which is
Mhm.
not the brand, it's part of the brand, how do you decide if this is the right one that you want to put forward to a client? You've just finished a branding exercise for your company. How do you decide? Do you feel it? Do you think it? What's going on?
Have to work the product, the thing that you are designing is the middle part of the process. And in some ways, paradoxically, even though that's what we create, it's the least important part. What you've got to think about is the before and the after. You've got to think about what is the message, what, in terms of a brand, what are the emotions, what are the ideas behind the brand, what are the values. You've got to have a very clear idea of those things. You've also got to think about the end part of the process, which is how is this going to be received? What are the audience, what are the target audience going to think about this? What are the target audience? What are their values? What do they see? How are they going to receive this message? And once you have a clear understanding of those two things, you've got the A, you've got the C, the B is the actual piece of communication. There are lots of different ways that you can communicate A to C. A and C don't change. They are not variable. But B, the thing you design, hate to say it, it could be a million different things. There are, you know what I mean? This is why I'm saying it's not the least important thing, but it's the least concrete thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at the thing, the options you've produced, and to work out whether it's successful or not, you've got to work out, does it embody the A? Does it embody the values and the ideas behind the company? Does it embody the brand? And is it going to have the effect we want it to have on the audience? Is it going to be engaging? Is it going to create that emotional connection? Is it going to grab your audience and make them look at it and help them to understand it? If it answers those two questions, then it's successful. If it's lacking in any of those two things, then it's not successful. That was a lot of reply.
Yes, so
Quite a
that's
garbled
the
reply.
because it can be part B can be a million different things. How do you get out of your own way then to pick what is it that you're going to propose? Say you've got a bunch of designs that you're working with and you're looking at them. How do you make that decision? I love thinking about decision making, especially in this time where we have more data available to us than anything. We will never have all the data we could have in order to make a decision. So then,
Yes.
how do you make those decisions knowing that you will never have a complete data set?
Because you have to trust in yourself and your skill and your, talent as a designer. The talent of a designer isn't to mechanically create designs. The talent of a designer is to understand the ideas. So you have to trust in your own talent to see that it has been a success in conveying those ideas. And a lot of it is to do with looking and surrounding yourself with good, successful design work and understanding what's gone before and looking at your inspiration. You know what you're trying to do. You know who you're trying to speak to. What other people have done that? How has that successfully been done in the past? What are your sources of inspiration? What are your reference points? You can create something successful by seeing other things that contain elements of what you are trying to do successfully and bring those reference points together. Incidentally, if you can make those the further away those reference points are, the more original your work is going to be. Your work is a synthesis of all the things that are out there. There's nothing original out there. We know there's nothing new under the sun, right? Everything is influenced by something else. But the wider your influence is, the more interesting and original your synthesis is going to be. And that's a very important step, creative step. I have to be able to put myself in the position of the audience and think about, okay, how does that make me feel as the audience? But really your skill as a designer is to understand how it's going to intuitively, how it's going to make other people feel intuitively, how it's going to trigger other people's
so all designers should have an undergrad in psychology.
Essentially, it also takes understanding that you just got to place value. Sorry. Out you go, kitty cats. Here you go. You've got to understand that there is a massive value in that intuition. That intuition, that emotional connection is what's going to drive people's behavior and decision making, much more so than any kind of rational knowledge. People aren't going to look at a logo and say, oh yeah, look, that represents this part of a business. Oh, and it's a bit like it's a bit like the initials of their business. Nobody cares about that. I mean, there are design agencies out there that work very hard at that visual pun. But what we try and do, we're less concerned with that. What we want to do, we want to make that emotional connection, which you're absolutely right, happens on a heart, gut level rather than an intellectual level. You've got to get people in the gut. People don't make those kind of intellectual decisions about design and communication. They don't think it, they feel it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we just don't realize that, like you said before, that design is everywhere and we interact with design on a daily basis. And it's something that just can improve our lives or doesn't.
Yes, absolutely. Well, poor design. I mean, there's a lot of poor design out there. And I think poor design hinders us because it confuses us. Good design, you know what good design is for. It makes you feel and understand things. Poor design doesn't do that. So you don't just have to, as a designer, you don't just have to be designing an opera house or a massive branding project, arts-based, exciting branding project to make it worthwhile design. You can touch people's lives in a small but profoundly powerful way just by improving fish finger packaging or whatever it is you happen to be working on. It really is, there's a lot of validity in all aspects of graphic design.
Wrapped up in one fish finger package. I love it.
Exactly.
I love it. Is there any words of wisdom you would have for our audience? So anything from people who are looking to get into graphic design as a career, or people who are looking for graphic design for their business, or just as somebody who's been an expat in many different countries?
Words of wisdom. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I think wisdom is a hot commodity these days, and I know you've gathered a fair amount of it in your journey.
Well, I don't know about that. Everybody's a work in progress, aren't they?
Absolutely.
I think I think it goes back to what we were talking about very much at the beginning, which is don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail. You'll only improve by failing. And that goes both for what I learned traveling around and what I learned trying to find something that interested me. Do something. Don't be afraid to fail in it. You will learn something anyway. And it also goes into the graphic design process. It's all about improvement, refining. Don't be afraid if the first thing you're doing is failing, because you got to fail first before you succeed. You will refine, improve. You will get to where you want as long as you communicate, collaborate, and work and put the work in.
Thank you, Gabriel. I think that's a fabulous way to wrap up our podcast. And I love that. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really enjoyed talking to you.
It was great. Thanks so much, Shannon. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's great to speak to you.
Thank you so much for listening. Gabriel is a wealth of information, and I hope this conversation expanded your perspectives on the world of design as well as decision making. And please like, subscribe, follow, and let us know what resonated with you in the comments. Have a fabulous week and see you next week.